Hi, this is Kalyan from Sai Solution, and today we are going to talk about an interesting concept called time. The relevance of time is the topic of the day. Now, to understand this relevance of the time under the light of nature and life, we need to actually understand a couple of things as a background before we hit upon to the time. Now, nature and life is a philosophy and science to explore form and formless both. When we talk about form and formless, the meaning is the perceivable and non-perceivable aspect of nature and life. Because we understand the nature and life both are combination of form and formless. We need to consider both the things as important uh, as reality. Now, this nature and life philosophy has a foundation of a science called pure nature cure. Pure nature cure is considered to be a materialistic science and philosophy where the matter actually is considered primary compared to the non-matters. Does it mean that it actually negates the existence of non-matter? It is not. It is actually exploration of non-matter or the formless or non-perceivables, considering that the form is the primary, considering the perceivability is the primary for the life. And it is simple because the life starts with the physical matter. Zygote is the physical matter contributed by the parents, brings the life for us. And then the vitality comes and the life starts. So we consider that without the perceivable entity, the physical matter, the life cannot be claimed. Definitely the driving force is that ultimate vitality. So considering the form as the primary and formless as the ultimate is the whole concept or the proposal of pure nature. Now, going forward, what is the relevance of the time we have to establish on this, right? Why we are talking about so much of perceivable and non-perceivable aspects of life. Now, if we watch closely, the life has got these three domains: the physical, physiological, and psychological. And what are all these? These are, in other words, we talk about the mechanical, chemical, and neural. Mechanical, chemical, and neural. Now, the mechanical or a physical is absolutely perceivable. These are forms. Now, physiological is something in between. Psychological or the neural is completely non-perceivable. Like whatever is going on in the neural aspects cannot be proven, cannot be perceived, cannot be shown clearly. Right? We'll come to the executions of life. There we'll be able to correlate clearly. Now, this physiological aspect is actually the bridge between the form and formless. The life starts with the physical entity. There, the neural function actually is not there at the beginning. Slowly and gradually, the zygote forms the neural structure and then the neural function starts. So, with the chemical action within the zygote, the neural function is established. So, this chemical function or the physiological function works as a bridge between the physical existence and the neurological existence or the psychological existence. Right. Now, as far as the execution of life is concerned, this is very important to understand. The execution of the life is actually in these three layers: actions, feelings, and thinking. Now, action is again a perceivable, physical entity, and thinking is non-perceivable. Whatever I'm thinking, I cannot show it to you. You cannot see it. You cannot perceive it, right? So I can try to prove my thinking through the action, but then again, action is an action. So thinking remains non-perceivable. Now, the feeling is the bridge in between. Every action will be followed by a feeling, by some feeling, and then thinking. And then thinking again will generate some feeling and bring some action. So this cycle goes on and on. Act, feel, think, feel, act. Act, feel, think, think, feel, act. So this way, the existence of the life is established. So we need to understand, as far as the executions are concerned, actions are perceivable execution, thinking is non-perceivable execution, and feeling is the bridge between. Right? Now let's proceed to the measurements, the topic of the day. Time is a measurement, right? And we have studied in physics the MKS system, if you remember, MKS system, or the standard international system, where M stands for meter, K stands for kg, and S stands for second, right? Meter measures the distance, kg measures the mass, and seconds measure the time. So these three are considered as primary measurements of the form, because the formless we cannot dare to uh, measure to start with. Now we'll come to the measurements of the formless later on. That's an innovation or invention of science. But let's start with the primary aspect. The primary measurements of the forms are these three things: mass, distance, and time. Distance, mass, and time, MKS, as we understand. Now, what is this mass? Mass is the quantification of the physical entity. We have brought some reference and we started measuring the mass of the physical existence. Now the distance is distance between two physical existence which are dynamic. So that means the distance also can change, and mass also changes, because understanding of nature and life basically is understanding this change, because this is not the negation to the formless aspect. We need to understand the forms, but we cannot be fixated at the form, because form also is changing. That understanding is very important. So now the change, to measure the change, we need a reference. Without the reference, we cannot measure the change. That reference point is a concept called time. Otherwise, time cannot be perceived, cannot be established, cannot be shown. So time is a concept of reference to measure the change of mass and distance to start with. Now, understanding the impermanence is the goal of bringing this concept of time under the light of nature and life law. Time is very important aspect to understand the impermanence, the perennial change that is happening. The physical changes in mass is nothing but the birth and death aspect. The birth and death aspect is understood with reference to the time and the change in the physical mass. And the distance, the past and future, is another concept that we try and understand with the reference of the time. Something before the present is the past, something after the present is the future, with reference to the time. So time helps us to understand this. Now, if we are fixated about the time, then we actually bring some kind of irrational entity of imagination and assumption. That we have to understand clearly, right? So we need to use the term, the time, the concept of the time, to bring awareness about the birth and death, to bring awareness about the past and future, to understand the impermanence. We cannot remain fixated with the time and start imagining something or assume something. Then we'll go irrational. We need to understand. But before I conclude, I'll just touch upon few of the secondary measurements which are dependent on the time that has been introduced by physics. So in physics, so speed is one aspect. Speed is nothing but the change in distance with reference to the time, that is considered as speed. And the acceleration is the next concept that has been introduced in physics. This is also with reference to the time, which is nothing but the change in the speed with reference to the time. That is considered as acceleration, or A. Right? Now, in the concept of force, we actually bring the mass concept also. It is a product of mass and acceleration. So that you see that mass and acceleration is a force which is actually nothing but change in the speed with reference to the time into the mass, right? So this is what is the force, and energy is actually measured by the way of measuring work. Work is nothing but the product of force and the distance. So we actually play around with the primary measurements of the forms to bring other concepts. So ultimately the energy concept is a non-perceivable concept, which is a combination of the all measurements that we understand to measure the forms. So there we again bring a bridge in between the form and formless with the concept of the time primarily. So I look forward to your question and further discussion on this dialectical concept of the time and the relevance of the time. Till then, bye-bye. Thank you.